All right, let's start back up. On 542 here, the author mentions in this first paragraph, throughout this book, you have created both console and GUI apps. I think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I think the main reason that she's concentrated on console apps is twofold. First of all, they're easier typically to write. And second of all, one of the reasons they're easier is they typically involve less code. All right, so that's my guess. I don't know. It's funny because the book that I used at the institution I used to teach at didn't even talk about console apps at all. They mentioned it in the first chapter. You can also create console apps. That was it. Everything else was GUI, the entire book. So, controls are often called widgets. I believe that widgets is one of the things that's on your next test. It might be at the end of the chapter or at the end of the test where they have the fill in the blank thing. I think that's what it is, but it's widgets. So remember what widgets. And in fact, Java calls them widgets. I think that's where C# took it from. All right. They go through here and they talk about, it says when you design a form, you place buttons and other controls on the form surface. In C#, the control class does all this stuff. These are things that get written in those files that are in the background. So you typically don't have to worry about this stuff. I do want to mention, though, this definitely is on the test, maybe in more than one place. This Marshall by ref object. It says figure 12.1 shows that all controls are objects. They are also Marshall by ref objects. A Marshall by ref object is one you can instantiate on a remote computer so you can manipulate a reference to the object rather than a local copy of the object. What they're talking about here is very, very similar. It's not identical, but it's very similar to what is referred to in other languages as a pointer. Remember, we used ref parameters in earlier chapters? It's kind of the same thing. So remember what Marshall by ref object, as it says, is one you can instantiate on a remote computer so that you're able to work with references or addresses rather than a local copy. Now, you're all writing that down, which is fine. You're going to write it down again in a couple minutes probably, because when we go over the test review, that's going to be in there. I guarantee that it's in there. All right. On pages 543 and 544, they show most of the classes that deal with this stuff. Again, do you have to worry about that? The answer is no. All right. On the bottom of 544, they show the properties that you deal with most often. It's on the bottom of the page. These are all things we've talked about, the main ones. Ethan just asked a question about the background image, so I showed you that one. We've worked with back color. You can set an anchor property so that basically you're not able to move the form around, that it anchors to a certain spot on your screen, etc. And there's a bunch of other ones that are in here. All right. But what they're trying to show you, enabled is one we've used. For color is the font color. All right. Back color is the background color. Okay. But what they're trying to show you is these are most of the properties that all controls have. All right. Even more on page 546. I don't want to keep going. You can see it. Now, I did mention this earlier. We really haven't done any work with this, but if you were to go to work for a company and become a C# programmer, and your company made GUI applications, the chances are virtually 100% that the projects that you work with would have multiple forms. You could do that. You know, and you've seen this before. If you look up on the screen here, that, you know, here's our form, etc. You know, you're familiar with that stuff. All right, but I can also go up to my project here, right mouse click on it as we've done before, and choose add new item, and I can choose a form. All right, Windows form. You know, hello.cs. And it's going to then create a form for me. There it is. And it's possible for me to take, typically the way that you do this is if I want the form that's up there to not show anymore, I do what's called a hide on it. So if I went back to my original form here, which was form1.cs, all right, I right mouse click here and I choose view code. I should be able to, in here someplace, all right, let's just, well, throw a button on here just so you see it. All right, so if I've got a button here, I should be able to say form1.hide, and it may not be hide anymore because they keep changing the stuff around, but that is what you do. And if I want the other one to show, then I can say whatever we call this one, which I guess was hello.show. So it is possible for you to do that, to have forms. When you do that, you literally, that's what you want to do, is hide and show. You don't want to work with a visible and visible property. You want to do it the standard way, all right, which is using hide and show, or like I said, some derivation of that. Maybe it's even mentioned in here. I don't know. It says you will learn to add more forms to a project in the You Do It exercises later in the chapter. Why would you want multiple forms? What if on my first page, what if I'm writing a big payroll application? And on the first page, I've got a list of radio buttons. And you choose, just like kind of like we did on the last test. Hourly employee, commission employee, piecework employee, something like that. And as you click one of those, maybe just clicking that, there's not even a button. As soon as you click that, it brings up a form just for an hourly employee or just for a piecework employee. Yeah, so the more complex your program is, and that's also what you see, is that's going to be the one time where you might take some of your variables and you might make them public if they have to be shared between different forms. All right.
I'll get like a program set up or software set up or something like that.
There's
You know, it says like installation wizard or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of forms.
Yeah.
You just have a bunch of names.
Yes, you could actually build that in here, and actually they actually have a wizard type of thing that you could use for that. A lot of the software that was written in years past was written in the C programming language. All right, and C is about as close as you can get to machine language, other than assembler. All right, and it's very fast and it's very powerful. Problem is, it's totally non-GUI. So then they came up with languages like C++, which was object-oriented C, and allowed you to be GUI, and this is another derivation of that. All right, because sometimes people just, they can't live without their GUIs. And I've said this before, you might laugh, but it's true. I don't know if you did this or not, but 9 times out of 10, if you came in here the first day of class, and rather than you buying a book, I gave you a book, the first thing you'd be doing would be this. And why are you doing that? Why are you paging through it? What? You want to see if there's pictures. And there's 2 reasons for that. First, every time there's a picture, that's less I've got to read. That's always good news. And second, if there's pictures, then ideally when they're asking me to do something, they're going to show me what they want me to do. People are typically much more comfortable, all right, with pictures than they are with non-pictures. And if you don't believe that, think about a website. Think about whatever website you go to often. How many people in here, I'm asking, go to a website often that is entirely text and it has no graphics, no images, no nothing? You probably don't, because it gets boring to just see text after text after text. All right, examining the IDE's generated code, middle of page 547, says the figure shows a form. The following actions have been performed. A new Windows form project was created, a label was dragged out there, and a button was dragged out there. So it looks like this. All right. And the author is saying that once you do that, this code was generated for you. You don't have to do that. That's in one of those background files. In fact, if you look up on the screen, please. All right, when we've got all this stuff, let me remove that. But when you've got all this stuff, remember that in addition to these things here, there's a file here that's got, it's called form1.designer.cs. If I double click on that, that's where virtually all of that stuff was built. See that? You never want to jack with that file. I've had people do that. Well, I changed the name and it was giving me this error, so I went into one of these system files and I changed it. Well, now you get to write the program over again. All right, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying that even Microsoft recommends you don't do it. All right. And they explain a lot of this stuff in here. Is it important? It's interesting stuff. So if you're the kind of person who likes to know what goes on underneath the hood, so to speak, behind the scenes, whatever you want to say, there's some good reading in here on 548, 549, and 550. All right. And if you say, it might be interesting, I don't have the time, I don't really care, but I'd like to know a little more. Well, if you notice on page 550, she has one of her videos where she goes through it too. And remember, typically with those videos, they're somewhere between 3 and 10 minutes long. They're not like my videos, which never seem to end. All right? They're nice. They break them down into manageable chunks. All right. So, I'm asking you this. Do we have to go through this section? I don't think there's anything in there that we haven't already seen. Okay? So that goes all the way through page 554. On page 554, on the bottom of the page, they go through a link label. Now, I went through it with you. Oops, 554. I went through the link label with you, but not in the depth and breadth of coverage that the author goes through it with you. Okay? So, if you look on the top of 555, here are your major, all right, those are your major properties that you're going to use with those. All right? They have an example of a form that uses this stuff on page 556. All right. And as Ethan mentioned before, this might be a time where if you have some kind of a setup thing where you've got a lot of link labels in there. It might be something as simple as go to the next page, all right, or it might not. You'll notice that they don't do that here. Like in the book, they've got these things. There are a lot of universal symbols. I don't know if that even shows on yours right there. But to a lot of people, that's what they look for on a page, is they look for links if they want to maneuver their way around. You're going to see this next semester. Next semester, we're both going to build our own project in the book that we use, and we're going to use the one that's in the book already. You may or may not like it as we go on. It's called the Halloween Superstore. And literally what it is it's a company that sells all sorts of Halloween equipment. All right? And we'll build something that's similar to that. But what I'm saying is if you want to peruse your way from form to form, they typically do it with buttons, but you could just as easily do it with link labels. All right, if you wanted to do that. It is even possible for you to come in there. You wouldn't do it so much in here, but in ASP.NET, you could go in and you could create a link label. I don't know why you do this, but you could. You could create a link label, add CSS to it, and even though it was a link label, you could make it look just like a button if you wanted to do that. Yes, that is exactly what it is.
And then like the fine print or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, like a lot of times,
Privacy policy, I consider that
yeah,
fine print.
yeah. Have you ever done that where they'll tell you they might now you know what a checkbox is. You might have a checkbox here. Check this to agree to our list of terms and conditions, and then usually they'll have the terms and conditions in a link, and you click on that, it'll bring up 15 pages, which they know you're never going to read. All right, same thing with color. If you look on the bottom of page 558, all of page 559, they show you the basic colors that you have available to you. The idea is if you don't like those, and you've already seen this, I don't want to keep beating this point to death, but again, the idea is if I come through here with my design and I come in and, I go over to here and I've got this and I find my back color. That even if I look here, there are ways that you can create your own color palette, and think about why you might want to do that. Because when you look on here, I don't know how many there are, let's say 30 or 40, something like that. You might want to give the user the opportunity to create their own color that's not in here. You can do that. You can bring up a color palette where they can combine any colors that they want to combine. Now, if you notice here on page 560, and it's pretty long. It goes from 560 through 565. There is a You Do It project. If this is not making sense to you, again, I can't keep saying this too much. Go in there and key in the You Do It project. All right? All right, on 565. Now they talk about the checkbox and the radio button. I showed you them in action, but what I do want to mention is if you take a look on the screen here, it's also at the bottom of your page, that checked operation indicates whether or not it's checked. But here's a little reminder, a little thing for you on your test. This is the default event. Check changed. So if you double click on a radio button or you double click on a checkbox, it brings up that radio button or that checkbox's check changed event. And that's what you're literally doing. Every time you click a radio button option or every time you click a checkbox, a check changed event occurs. Do you all hear that? Again, it's on the test. Radio buttons and checkboxes share a lot of the same types of properties, just so you know. And it's funny, the author does this. I can't think of a book I've ever used that when they start talking about checkboxes and radio buttons, doesn't make a pizza application. They just do it. You know, even if it's a JavaScript book, you know, it's a pizza app. And why? Because, you know, even an even better one than this isn't bad, the dining options. Did you ever see that even Pizza Hut has that? When they ask you what kind of crust you want, you can't choose two crusts unless you're having two pizzas. All right? So sometimes there is only one choice. All right? But as far as your toppings, there's all sorts of choices. Okay? Now, this is the way it used to be done. To be honest with you, if you ever go out to a place like pizzahut.com, I can say this from personal experience, but a lot of times when you go to add different options, now they have pictures of them, and you just click on the picture. Now, both radio buttons and checkboxes have a check property, which is true or false. Remember that in here, only one of these can be true. So when you're working with checkboxes, with radio buttons, either if you've got a group of them, either one is true or none are true. That's the only option you have. When you work, for example, in here, you could have 0 buttons checked, 1 button checked, 2 buttons checked, 3 buttons checked, or all 4. And any combination with 2 and 3 as far as those being checked. Picture boxes as we move up to 569. Notice a GUI element designed to display graphics. They work best with JPEGs and GIFs, but they'll take bitmaps. They'll even take other things. This is not the control you should use if you want to drop a video in. There are better controls to do that. Actually, you can use it. But to do that, you have to add some text. If you remember when we did that magic 8-ball, and I wanted that ta-da thing to play, that we had to come in there, for example, and I had to create a sound player. Okay? So here are the major properties, the major 3 shown on 569. Image, which is the name of the image. Size mode, and we already looked at that. And click. The default event generated when the user clicks the picture box. In the book that I used to use when I taught this class at another institution, one of the first programs people did was they had a button, and on the button and you could do it with or without a button, but you would say flip. And when you click the button, it would randomly select a 0 or a 1. If it selected a 0, a picture of a Washington quarter with heads came up. And if you chose, if it came up with a 1, tails would come up. Sometimes students didn't like that. They wanted to be able to click on the coin itself. So they would put the stuff in the click event to make that happen. And again, just run through the example if you're having problems with this. They show you how to go and add those resources on 570 and 571. All right, I'm just going to jump up to 572. And here, list box, checklist box, and combo box. As I already mentioned to you, and this is the chart or a table that's on the bottom of page 572. All right, the bottom of page 572. As the author says here, probably the most important thing that you'll deal with in here is the items. All right, because you use the items if you want to add things, remove things, and modify things, or move things around. Multi-column, you can have your display in more than one column. All right, selected index, this is a key thing. I don't know if it's on a test or not, but if there is nothing selected, it returns -1. But since you're working with computers, if you choose the first item, that's item 0. So if you want to check for something not being selected, you check for -1. And you've got your choice then. You can select the item. You can select the index too. The index is where it's located. The item is what's located at that index. Right. Sorted, I already showed you. There's a selection mode, and as it says in here, it says how many items can be selected. All right, if you set the selection mode, to multiple, then you can select multiple options in a list box or a combo box or whatever. All right. A list box is typically for things that aren't going to change that often. With a combo box, and I didn't show you this before, that was dumb of me, but I want to right now. I'm going to grab a combo box, and I'm going to throw it in here. All right, you already saw that. But if you look, because there's a property in here which I don't remember what it's called. That isn't it. Unless they've changed it. I don't think they have. But there's different ways that you can set this up. All right. Notice, for example, we got sorted. We talked about all that stuff. But when you look at a combo box like this, this kind of combo box that you see right here, you click it and it shows you the options. But there's a way to set it up so you can have different formats of this. And what do I mean? That you can set up a combo box like this that is a drop down, but it also allows you to type your own option in there. All right. And if you type that in and hit enter, it'll add it to the list for you. All right. That's probably discussed in here. I'm just not seeing it right now. So. You get some code that look like this. So what they have here, if you look up on the screen, please, this is 575. They're asking you to select one or more classes from here. Then they loop through it, and they say if it was selected, they add 1 to a count. Because now they can figure out exactly how many classes you selected. Maybe it's ranking, and they've got a list of programs, and they want to see if you're interested in more than one program. So they can send you out their paraphernalia on different programs. All right. There's the checklist box on 576. Already mentioned that to you. I've never really had reason to use that. You may or may not. On 577, here's the month calendar and the date time picker. Here are some things that you can put in. Notice that's the last day that can be selected. Default is 12/31/99/98. Don't want to hurt anybody's feelings there, but none of you will be here. Neither will I at that time. All right? Because that's over 7,000 years from now. We don't even know if the planet will be here. in 99, 98. But you can see you can put big things in here. All right. You can do all sorts of stuff with dates. I've got to look because what I had done earlier in the semester, and I'm going to look for it for tomorrow, is I wrote this application that uses all this stuff. And if I can find it, we'll build that tomorrow. Because I think that'll help you more than anything in this chapter will. When you set up your date, you can set them up in different formats. You ever done that? You ever go into a Word document? Sometimes you want it to look like this. I'm sending out a document right now. I'm contesting something that happened in my life, and I wrote it so it's got today's date on it. So it's Monday, March 6th, 2016. Sometimes you don't want that. You just want it with hyphens or dashes or whatever. Working with the forms layout as I jump all the way up to page 581. Is this something you already know? In other words, when you come in here, and now I want to put two buttons in here, okay? And I drag a button in. See that blue snap line that they talk about right there? If I want stuff to line up, or if I want this to be the same width, I can click on it, click over here, and eventually I get the snap line type of an idea. All right, I don't think that's anything new to you. They talk about that in here. Typically, again, you use it to line things up. This, I don't like working with this because they talk about the anchor property. All right, but it's another way that you can line things up. Some people like it, some people don't. But they say anchoring is useful, this is 582, when users expect a specific control to always be in the same general location in a container. So that might be why you'd want to use that. 583, they talk about group boxes. I just showed you a group box. There's also a panel. All right. So group boxes can display a caption. That's why I showed it to you. Panels don't. But panels will give you scroll bars if your thing is too long, where group boxes don't give you scroll bars. Menu strips turning up to 585. I think we've kind of beat those to death. They're pretty self-explanatory. I believe they are, at least. If they're not, again, turning to 586. Notice again, she has another video with working with menus. She has another turning up to page 587. There is another you do it exercise. All right, and that's on 587, 588, 589, 590, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, which ends the chapter. All right, so it's a very long exercise. It's more than 10 pages. But if you're struggling through this stuff, either start up a new project and just throw a bunch of stuff up there, or go through these you do it exercises. All right, so let's go through the review. So if you would, in your book, please, I'm on the bottom of page 599. So here's the review questions. All right. Number one, labels, buttons, and checkboxes are all of these. They're GUI objects, they're controls, they're widgets. Again, widgets are, I'm sure that's on the test someplace. So number one is D, all of these. Number two, all control objects descend from what's called the component class. So number two is B, component. Number 3, of the following, which is the most like a radio button? The answer is a button, because as it says here, radio button descends from button, which means it is a child of button. It's also very similar as far as its methods to a list box. Number 4, which of the following is not a commonly used control property? The answer is B, language. Number 5, the control you frequently use to provide descriptive text is a label. You should already have known that. Number 6, which of the following creates a label named first label? This is kind of an important concept. If you look on the screen, what that is doing, just so you know, is that is creating it in code. You wouldn't see that label on the screen until the program ran, and just doing that doesn't throw it on the screen. You'd have to make it visible also. But you can create, most people create their app like the way I've been showing you, if it's going to be a GUI and you have your controls as the program's working. But you might have a very interactive program where you ask the user questions and you literally build the form based on the answers that they give you to questions. Number 7, the property that determines what the user reads on a label is the A text property. Again, that shouldn't be new to any of you. Number 8, you can create your own font object. All right? Arial, 14 point, bold. Number 9, the default event for a control is the one that B is generated when you double click it. That's a great answer, because what they're saying in English there is, anytime you want to know what a control does by default, you double click it. You put it on a form, you double click it, and that's the default event. So number 9 is B. Number 10, assume you have created a label named My Label. Which of the following will set its background color to green? It's kind of a pain to do it in code, but this is what you have to do. Dot back color equals system dot drawing dot color dot green. This does the same thing as what I showed you, going into the back color, choosing the web one and choosing green. They work the same way. Number 11, what's one difference between a checkbox and a radio button? So number 11 is B. Only one radio button can be selected at a time. Again, it's the idea of what I told you before. They're known as being mutually exclusive, all right, options. Number 12. The check property of a radio button can hold the values true or false. So number 12 is A, true or false. Number 13, the control in which you can display a bitmap or a JPEG image is D, a picture box. She always puts stuff in here like this, and one or more of you might get tripped up. Image holder doesn't make any sense. Most of these that she puts in here don't make any sense. So images, picture box. Number 14, so that was D for 13. 14, list box, combo box, and checklist box all describe or descend from which family? A, the list control family. 14 is A. 15, which of the following properties is associated with a list box but not with a button? Selected item, B. Because remember, for a list box, you can have multiple items in there. Button, you can't do that. Doesn't make sense. So 15 is B. 16. With a list box, you can allow the user to choose only if you've got it set to single selection, or more than one if you've got it set to multi-select. So 16 is C. 17. You can add items to a list box by using the, I don't think that that's right. That's her answer. I'd never heard of add range. All right. You know what? I'm going to take for granted that she knows what's in there. I guarantee you, if that question would ever be on a test, I'd give you all credit for it. Because if I don't know what the hell it is, I wouldn't expect you to know it. It actually might be D. I don't know. I just have never heard add range before. Number 18. A list box's selected item property contains the value of the currently selected item. And just so you know, A, that's not selected item. A is selected index. (19) When you create a list box, by default, its selection mode is 1. What they're saying is, by default, you can only select one item. But you can change that. Finally, number 20. A horizontal list of general options that appears under the title bar is a menu strip. Menu strip, oftentimes referred to as just a menu. All right, let's take another break. It's 10:03. Let's come back. Let's make it about 10:15. Then we'll do the test review. All right, and then we're going to work on that other problem. If any of you want to get ahead during the break, I'm going to bring up your Chapter 12 test review. That's the last page, so those are all the definitions. I'll leave that up there for just a second, but I want to stop taping first, so...